The story of how I ended up giving birth in a Los Angeles hospital alone and unmarried is one for the books. My family back home believed I was diligently pursuing my studies in America. My two best friends, Rosie and Sasha, had taken time off work to visit, ostensibly for a vacation, but really to provide moral support during my final weeks of pregnancy. We found ourselves swept up in the vibrant atmosphere of a local music festival. The energy was infectious, the music loud and exhilarating. Rosie and Sasha, perhaps overindulging in the celebratory spirit, got quite drunk. I, on the other hand, was the designated responsible one, nursing a sparkling water and trying to ignore the increasingly insistent twinges in my lower back. Those twinges, of course, turned out to be the early stages of labor, far earlier than anticipated. I maintained a surprising level of composure. I called an ambulance, calmly informed the paramedics of my situation, and once in the delivery room, I focused on timing my contractions, regulating my breathing with the techniques I diligently practiced. Despite the premature onset, I felt relatively in control. This was manageable. I could do this. But as the contractions intensified, becoming a relentless, pounding force that no amount of deep breathing could alleviate, my calm began to fray. It felt as though two sledgehammers were relentlessly attacking my lower back. Gritting my teeth, I managed to ask the attending nurse, in English, how dilated I was. Amidst the flurry of medical jargon and the cacophony of the bustling delivery room, I heard a voice, shockingly familiar, speaking in perfect Mandarin, fetal heart rate decelerating. "We need to perform an amniotomy." A male doctor? I pushed the thought aside. In this moment, gender was irrelevant. All that mattered was the safe delivery of my baby. But then, the amniotomy. The sharp, unexpected pain was almost unbearable. Amniotic fluid is meconium-stained. Preparing for a C-section, the same voice announced, again switching between English and Mandarin, as if making a special effort to ensure I understood. A C-section? No. I'd spent months walking 10 miles a day, religiously following every bit of advice to ensure a natural birth. I was not prepared for this. Summoning my remaining strength, I grabbed the doctor's scrubs. "Please," I begged, my voice trembling, "give me another chance. I walked so much. I was determined to have a vaginal delivery." He turned, and our eyes met. My jaw dropped. It was him. Ethan. My ex. Of all the possible scenarios, of all the indignities the universe could throw at me, ending up in the delivery room with the man who'd broken my heart was surely the most absurd. "There's meconium in the amniotic fluid. It's too dangerous to delay the C-section," he said, his voice calm and professional, exactly as it had been the day he'd ended things. My anger, fueled by pain and hormones, flared. He was a neurosurgeon. What was he doing in obstetrics? And now he was going to see everything? The humiliation was overwhelming. Through a wave of tears, I managed a small, desperate request. Could you make the incision as low as possible? I still want to wear a bikini." He leaned in, his voice softening slightly. "Don't cry," he murmured. "I haven't slept in over 30 hours. If I'm not careful, the scar won't be pretty." His words had the desired effect. I instantly shut my mouth. In the 10 minutes of relative calm that followed, I mentally reviewed our brief relationship, searching for any instance where I might have wronged him. Finding none, I breathed a small sigh of relief. At this point, I could only see his head, not his hands, a small comfort in this bizarre situation. Perhaps sensing my anxiety, he spoke again. "Giving birth is such a huge event. Why are you alone? Where's the baby's father?" He's busy," I mumbled. Which, in a way, was true. "What about your family?" "They don't know I'm having a baby." "That's irresponsible," he said, a judgment that stung, especially coming from him in this vulnerable moment. "Dr. Hayes," I snapped, my patience wearing thin, "could you please focus?" Before I could finish, I felt a tugging sensation on my abdomen. The anesthesia prevented sharp pain, but the pulling was unsettling. Then, a loud, healthy cry pierced the air. My baby! It had all happened so fast. My precious child. They quickly placed the baby, wrinkled and perfect, on my chest. This was worth it. Every bit of it. Tears of overwhelming joy streamed down my face. After the surgery, Rosie and Sasha finally arrived, their chatter filling the room. "Wow, she's beautiful. She looks just like you." Then, they saw Ethan, who was explaining my post-op care. Their jaws dropped, their eyes widening with the kind of look that screamed, "We need all the details." Oh, for a moment of peace. I was a new mother, exhausted and recovering. I waved them off, indicating I needed rest. They, thankfully, understood and wheeled the baby's bassinet over to the sofa, where they could coo and admire the sleeping infant. Despite my exhaustion, I overheard Rosie whisper, who signed the consent form for her C-section. Later that night, I woke up parched. Rosie and Sasha were sprawled on the 3-seater sofa, looking like they'd engaged in a wrestling match in their sleep. Thankfully, the Chinese postpartum doula I'd hired had arrived, and she was expertly caring for the baby. As I reached for a glass of water, a figure appeared beside me, taking the glass from my hand. "Didn't I tell you not to drink water for 6 hours after the surgery? Were you not listening?" "Ethan?" His tone was stern, but his actions were gentle. He carefully moistened my lips with a cotton swab. This tiny amount of moisture was hardly enough. I felt a surge of irritation, but he was the doctor, even if he was a neurosurgeon. He probably knew best. "By the way," I asked, "why are you working in obstetrics?" Ethan's hand hesitated. "It was an emergency. They needed someone." An emergency? Had he actually just used an idiom? I rolled my eyes, deciding to try and sleep again. 6 hours couldn't be that difficult. When I woke up again, Ethan was still there. Why was he always here? A nurse came in to change my dressing, commenting in English about how lucky I was to have such a devoted boyfriend, staying by my side. Boyfriend? Ethan, under my intense gaze, finally explained. "Yesterday, your situation was urgent. I told them I was your boyfriend so I could sign the consent forms for the surgery and anesthesia. So, he'd helped me deliver my baby and performed an impromptu C-section? The nerve. Although, I had to admit, a C-section was probably child's play for a skilled neurosurgeon." Ethan spoke again, his voice hesitant. "This baby." I propped myself up on the bed, gulped down half a glass of water, and then calmly stated, "This baby is the result of artificial insemination. I bought sperm." "Why?" His voice cracked, revealing an uncharacteristic level of shock that clashed with his usual stoic demeanor. "What's so surprising?" "I wanted a child of my own." "But you said the baby's father was busy. Do you know the person from the sperm bank?" This was getting complicated. I was exhausted and recovering from surgery, and now I had to explain away my inconsistent statements. I just wanted to enjoy my baby. From my parents' disastrous marriage, I'd learned one crucial lesson: avoid marriage at all costs. I'd flitted through life, enjoying fleeting connections, believing I could remain untouched. But Ethan had been different. I remembered the night I met him. He was sitting alone at the bar, nursing a drink, looking utterly miserable. A gaggle of young women hovered around him, each vying for his attention. It was my self-appointed duty to rescue despondent, attractive men and shield them from predatory advances. "Rough breakup?" I'd asked, sliding onto the stool next to him, pushing aside a girl with obviously enhanced lips and another with a suspiciously perfect nose. I'd intended to offer some words of comfort, but when he turned to face me, I was struck by his even more remarkable good looks. Calling him simply handsome felt inadequate. I could have waxed lyrical about his face for hours. He looked young, and in my experience, only the young treated matters of the heart with such gravity. But the way he raised an eyebrow at me suggested my question was too superficial. "Hey, it's not the end of the world," I said, grabbing a glass and clinking it against his. "Life's about being happy, right? Do whatever makes you happy." He picked up his glass, took a small sip, and said, "They say drinking makes you happy, but I'm still not happy." He was smiling, but his eyes held the lost, heartbreaking look of a young boy, overwhelmed and desperate. I recognized that look. I'd seen it in myself before. A sudden, almost overwhelming urge to play the savior, to rescue this lost soul, washed over me. "Maybe a change of scenery will help," I said, impulsively grabbing his hand and leading him out of the nightclub. My friends gave me surprised looks. I winked. Going to do a good deed. A change of scenery. Where better than my own apartment, stocked with a carefully curated collection of spirits. I had my own special cocktail recipes, concoctions designed to quickly obliterate reason with a blend of sweetness and high alcohol content. Usually, I'd drink alone, crawl under the covers, and sleep until I felt like a new person. This was the first time I'd brought a man home. I showcased my mixology skills, pouring one cocktail after another. We talked, our conversation meandering from whiskey to black pudding to the Highland cattle of Scotland. From Belgian beer to bioengineering to the intricate process of making tofu. Are you feeling any better? I wasn't sure if he was drunk, but I certainly was. My bones felt like jelly, and I was, as the saying went, drunk as a skunk, leaning heavily against his shoulder. He seemed remarkably sober for the amount he'd consumed. I'm going to be broke after this, I mumbled, realizing I needed to recoup my losses somehow. Emboldened by the alcohol, I placed my hand on his chest, just below his collarbone. He asked, "Why did you bring me home? Are you usually this casual?" That was my question. I'd assumed a few drinks, a bit of atmosphere, and we might, well, you know. I had selflessly rescued him, aiming to distract him from that broken heart. He'd drunk all my liquor. Surely, a little compensation was in order. But now he was refusing even that and questioning my character. My temper flared. I pushed him onto the bed, intending to make him understand exactly what kind of woman I was. What did you expect from a girl you met in a nightclub? Do you think demure girls pick up guys in clubs? Guys? Ethan frowned, a flicker of anger in his eyes. He gripped my waist, pulling me closer, his warm palm pressing against my skin. How could I explain that guy wasn't an insult? I swallowed, realizing an explanation probably wasn't necessary. Ethan had warned me not to bring strange men home. But at the time, he'd just started working at City Center Hospital, and he was constantly busy, unable to keep a constant watch over me. What have you been up to lately? The text was from Kevin, a childhood friend. Our parents had always dreamed of us marrying, envisioning a powerful alliance between our families. But Kevin was into cute, petite influencers, and I preferred, well, more substantial men. We were clearly not each other's type. After bringing Ethan home, I'd actually retreated from the club scene for a while. Sasha and Rosie, in our group chat, speculated, is Chloe finally settling down with her true love at almost 30? Don't be ridiculous, I'd replied, my legs are just sore. To prove I was still the same free-spirited Chloe, I donned my dancing shoes and my most dazzling outfit and returned to the dance floor. But after a few spins and a couple of blurry selfies posted to my social media, I retreated to a booth, feeling old. I just couldn't keep up anymore. That's when I saw Kevin unusually alone, without his usual entourage. He slid into the booth next to me. Why haven't you replied to my texts? This was odd. Our text conversations were usually sporadic and nonsensical. This sudden concern felt strange. I've been busy, I said. Doing what? Well, nothing really. The most demanding thing I'd been doing was dealing with Ethan. The young man was surprisingly possessive. He didn't want me looking at anyone else, insisted I delete certain social media contacts, and discouraged my clubbing. And drinking. Don't you Americans understand the concept of an open relationship? I'd asked him once, immediately regretting it. The exhaustion was real. First of all, I'm not really American, he'd replied. Second, am I not enough for you? My legs were still trembling from our last encounter. You're enough. More than enough. Kevin, still waiting for an answer, asked, Chloe, do you have a boyfriend? What? No way, I exclaimed, jumping to my feet. This was a matter of principle. Chloe could not have a boyfriend. Chloe was not meant to be tied down. If I had a boyfriend, then got married, wouldn't I just be repeating my parents' mistakes? Kevin looked at me, his expression unreadable. Just then, Ethan arrived. He walked straight over to us. Didn't you promise me you wouldn't drink anymore? He told me I was generally healthy, but I needed to stop drinking, or I might end up with serious health problems. I believed him. He was a doctor, and I had a certain reverence for doctors. Who are you to Chloe? Kevin asked, standing up, adding another layer of drama to the scene. Ethan held up our intertwined hands. Her boyfriend. Isn't it obvious? Kevin frowned at me. I was about to explain, but Ethan scooped me up in a princess carry. In front of everyone, he lifted me into his arms. The sudden loss of gravity made me instinctively cling to him. Ethan announced to everyone in the booth that I was his girlfriend, that I was 30 years old and had severe alcoholic liver disease, and that if I kept drinking, I could die, and someone would be held legally responsible. My rising anger was replaced by a wave of fear. Did I really have severe alcoholic liver disease? Despair washed over me. I wasn't even 30 yet. I was still considered young in the city, and yet I was afflicted with a disease usually associated with middle age. In a daze of sorrow, Ethan carried me back to his place. Dr. Hayes, I said, kneeling on the bed, reverently holding his hands, Do you know any good liver specialists? Why would you need a doctor? There's nothing wrong with you. But the alcoholic liver disease. I just think you're too enticing when you're drunk. I can't leave you out there on your own. I wouldn't feel safe. Ethan leaned down and brushed his lips against mine. Before I could react, he gently pushed me back onto the soft pillows. He smiled down at me, his long fingers playing with the buttons of his shirt. I was captivated. He didn't rush to kiss me, instead playing with my hair, a hint of sadness in his voice. I took time off work to celebrate our 100th day together, but you didn't even answer your phone. In a place like that, it was impossible to hear a phone ring. I traced my fingers from his toned arm to his collarbone, stopping at his chin and lips. My anger had dissipated, replaced by a twinge of guilt. It's all my fault. When my mind finally cleared, I told him I'd never had a boyfriend before, and that as a Chinese American, he needed to define exactly what girlfriend meant. Ethan's arm tightened around me, preventing me from sitting up. You being my girlfriend means you can only sleep with me from now on. Not bad. In just 3 or 4 months, his Mandarin had improved significantly, even his accent becoming more localized. What else? I looked up at him, smiling, my tone playful, but inside, I craved an answer. What happens when 2 people are in love and one day, one of them falls out of love or cheats? What does the other person do? My parents, both prominent lawyers, had been passionately in love when they were young, but their marriage was a mess. They cheated on each other constantly, filled with resentment. But unwilling to divorce. They'd curse each other, then go back to living together. I'd grown up in that environment, disillusioned by the idea of long-term, committed relationships. Humans aren't naturally monogamous. I'd never intended to have a long-term relationship with anyone. Ethan was an exception. But if I took him seriously and he cheated, I might be devastated enough to, well, I didn't want to think about it. He sighed, as if conceding a major point. I don't have any better solutions. I'll just have to work harder, I guess. So, it seemed his only solution was to wear me out. If I couldn't figure it out, it was best not to dwell on it. Exhausted, I fell asleep in Ethan's arms. When I woke up, he was gone. I got dressed and realized my phone was dead. As I headed for the door, I saw a note. Treating you to a seafood feast. Heart emoji. A seafood feast here? This was his long-term hotel suite, sparsely furnished, with only a few clothes. The semi-open kitchen had a small refrigerator, a microwave, a single-burner stove, and a kettle, but he spent most of his time at the hospital, didn't cook, and didn't even drink hot water. Come to think of it, I didn't know why Ethan was working here, or what his future plans were. I walked further into the suite. On the marble countertop in the living room, there was indeed a plate of food. It was a sun made of eggs, sausages cut to look like little octopuses, and cherry tomatoes shaped into hearts. Next to the plate was another note. Eat more vegetables, quit alcohol and sugar, be my girlfriend. Wink emoji. I ate the octopus and wrote on the note. No way. I strode out of the hotel, wondering how I was going to get home with a dead phone, when I saw a familiar car. It was Kevin. What a coincidence, I said, getting into the car without hesitation, regardless of whether he had other plans. Take me home later, okay? Kevin's expression was grim. He started the car and headed towards my apartment. I was puzzled. What are you doing here? Are you finished with whatever you were doing? Chloe, we're not getting any younger. What? Why was he suddenly bringing up age? Have you thought about settling down? Kevin, are you on something? Kevin remained silent for a long time. The atmosphere was awkward until we reached my apartment. I got out, but he didn't drive away. He lowered the window. There are a lot of shady people out there. If you're dating someone, you can have Ben check them out in the system. Ben was his best friend, a police officer. Their system was 1,000,000 times more reliable than any online background check service. But I wasn't dating anyone, not really. I looked at Kevin, confused. His window was still down, and I couldn't just walk away. I waited. Remember to charge your phone. Call me if you need anything. Then, as if making a difficult decision, he continued, I can still see your phone's location. If it bothers you, tell me and I'll remove you. I don't want to be worrying about your safety all night, waiting downstairs until dawn. I suddenly remembered. Years ago, when iPhones were first becoming popular, we were in high school. I joined his Apple Music family, planned to share his subscription. That's why he could always find my phone's location. Whenever I couldn't find my phone, or it was out of battery, I'd yell, "Kevin, help me play the sound." He'd reluctantly take out his phone and make my phone ring loudly, ding, 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 from wherever it was hidden. My phone had been pickpocketed a few times, and we'd always found it that way. The bar owner even bought me a drink once, asking me to help him catch more thieves. Kevin had found it annoying, pulling me away and warning me not to lose my phone again, that he wasn't going to help me find it anymore. Eventually, iPhones weren't so rare, and thieves weren't as interested. I'd forgotten about it, forgotten that Kevin was still paying for my music subscription every month, forgotten that he could always see my location. Kevin drove away. I felt a strange sense of disorientation. If I hadn't grown up with Kevin, I might have thought he had feelings for me. He'd never hesitated to flirt with influencers in front of me, and I hadn't shied away from flirting with fitness instructors in front of him. He'd teased me about my age and my low tolerance for alcohol, and I'd teased him about being good at accounting and nothing else. He was just a blunt older brother, worried about his clueless younger sister's safety. That was all. I shook my head, trying to clear the confusion. If Kevin and I ever had any romantic sparks, it would be a miracle. Ethan was enough to handle. I rubbed my legs, wanting to go home, sleep, and maybe find a massage parlor to relax. My phone finally turned on, and I saw messages from Ethan. He'd actually made a reservation at a seafood restaurant, planning to celebrate our 100th day, but I'd been clubbing and hadn't seen his messages. A few days later, I tried to see Ethan, but he was incredibly busy. We managed a quick meal near the hospital, then back to work he went. Before leaving, he reminded me, eat more vegetables, no alcohol, and no distractions. Rosie and Sasha appeared as if from nowhere. So, here you are, having a secret rendezvous with your little doctor. You can't even leave him alone during his lunch break? You're relentless. I'd wanted to explain that Ethan had worked a night shift yesterday, so I'd come to see him. But then I thought, Ethan wasn't really anything to me, just someone to help me pass a boring lunch hour. What are you thinking about? Probably heard Dr. Hayes. Things are moving fast. When are you going to introduce him to us properly? Rosie and Sasha were my high school friends, and we'd all gone to university in the same city, so we'd known each other for over a decade. They were surprised that I, someone who avoided complications, had driven over 40 minutes to a mall across from the hospital to eat a bland, leafy green salad. What are you two doing here? I asked, diverting their attention. Rosie suddenly winced, clutching her left cheek. I had a cavity, and then the dentist said I have a wisdom tooth growing sideways, pushing against the other teeth. He said it needs to be extracted, and the wound needs to be stitched, and I might need to be on 4 fluids. I've been talking about it in all our group chats for days. Haven't you noticed at all? Rosie was clearly upset. Sasha patted her hand. Luckily, I'm here with you. I told you to just get it extracted. Dr. Fan seems very professional. Rosie became even more agitated. He's not professional. You just think he's handsome. No, I don't. Sasha replied, in a soft, almost flirtatious tone. Chloe, ask your little doctor if we can have dinner with Dr. Fan sometime. My phone vibrated. It was a message from Ethan. The first message was his location. The second message was, want to treat Miss Chloe to a fancy dinner. Must book way in advance. I seized the opportunity. I replied, I want to introduce you to my friends. He replied with 3 exclamation marks. Really? But you need to bring Dr. Fan from the dental clinic. He replied with a string of ellipses. Then, after a long pause, he replied, which Dr. Fan from the dental clinic? The most handsome one. Woman. A few days later, at a fancy restaurant, 4 of us sat at a 5-person table. Rosie had bailed. She said she was terrified that her wisdom tooth was like evidence of her crime, and Dr. Fan would immediately drag her to the hospital to extract it. Sasha had gone all out, with subtle but elegant makeup, a sophisticated and understated outfit. If I hadn't been wearing shoes, I would have applauded her with all 4 limbs. Dr. Fan took off his mask, and to me, he looked like an ordinary young man. I examined him from every angle, and he elicited no physical reaction whatsoever. But Sasha had stars in her eyes, listening intently as he explained the formation of cavities, the care of baby teeth, and the importance of fluoride treatments. Tedious. Boring. I remembered the first time I met Ethan, we'd talked about the familial relationship between Scottish Highland cattle and Tibetan yaks. That was far more interesting. Ethan occasionally squeezed my hand. Don't keep looking at Dr. Fan. Today is our 200th day anniversary. Sasha overheard this crucial piece of information and immediately smiled apologetically, her eyes sparkling, her demeanor graceful and charming. I'd known her for so long, and I'd never realized she could be so stunning. I was almost swayed. I exchanged a knowing glance with the breathtakingly beautiful Sasha. We left the restaurant with our respective companions. Before I met Ethan, I understood that doctors were busy. After I met Ethan, I realized doctors were busy to the point of absurdity. They practically levitated with busyness. I started thinking, the first 200 days of our, whatever it was, he'd always been the one coming to me. I hadn't really reciprocated. Maybe I should make an effort. It didn't have to be the third 100-day milestone. I could just go see him. Even though I'd eaten countless bland salads at the cafe across from City Center Hospital, I'd never actually stepped inside the hospital to visit him. I had the same instinctive respect, bordering on awe, for teachers as I did for doctors and hospitals. Ethan, however, was an exception. He was surprisingly immature, not at all what I expected from a doctor. So, I went to that place, that bastion of antiseptic smells. I carried a Rolex watch box, but inside, instead of a watch, was a spring-loaded boxing glove, a classic gag gift. Corny, yes, but perfect. For him. More importantly, I was absolutely convinced he'd be thrilled to see me. To amplify that joy, I was even prepared, for this one day only, to acknowledge that we were, in fact, dating. And, of course, in addition to the gag gift, I'd ordered dozens of coffees, which a delivery person would be bringing shortly. I was determined to make a stellar impression on his colleagues. I was brimming with a completely unfounded confidence, a delusional certainty that he was utterly smitten with me. That delusion shattered the instant I saw him. He was embracing a beautiful female doctor, holding her tightly. They were both red-eyed, whispering to each other, surrounded by a circle of their colleagues. It was clear his colleagues had no idea I even existed. If I just walked away right now, no one in the world would know I'd been cheated on. My phone rang. It was the coffee shop employee. Hey, so, those 99 coffees, are they going to the 17th floor? It's going to be a little late because, it's a lot of coffee. Oh, what? Change the name on the order? To a patient? Which patient? Just anyone? Or throw them away? Hello? Hello? I'd never been cheated on before because I'd never had a boyfriend. But that day, the day I was ready to admit Ethan was my boyfriend, I felt the searing pain of betrayal. I erased that day from my calendar. It became just another day spent holed up at home. I didn't contact Ethan, and he didn't contact me. The next day, Ethan asked me to meet him for coffee at that same cheap cafe across from his hospital. I remember it vividly. He had his meager belongings packed in a suitcase. He said he was leaving. Going away for a while. I laughed. Leaving was leaving. What did for a while even mean? Was I supposed to remain celibate during this while? But I said nothing. He sensed something was off, but he didn't know what to say. His phone vibrated constantly, someone urging him to hurry. He was preoccupied, barely touching his coffee, which grew cold. I know you can't stand being alone. I won't ask you to wait for me indefinitely, he finally said, adding insult to injury by implying I was incapable of being alone. Huh. I smiled sweetly, picked up my coffee, and threw it in his face. Then I turned and walked away without a backward glance. So satisfying. All those years of watching dramas had finally paid off. Our, whatever it was, ended silently, without fanfare. I maintained a fake smile, power-walking all the way back to my apartment, where I buried myself under the covers and sobbed uncontrollably. He didn't even call to try and make things right. Rosie and Sasha couldn't reach me, so they came to my apartment, their voices a cacophony of concern and exasperation. No way. You actually cared about him. Falling for a younger guy is a recipe for heartbreak. I'll delete him for you. There are plenty of other fish in the sea. Come on, my old baby, put on your armor and let's hit the dance floor. They snatched my phone, hauled me out of bed, and forcibly sat me down in front of my vanity mirror. That's the blunt, no-nonsense way fierce women offer encouragement. But when I saw my clown-like reflection in the mirror, I nearly threw up. And then I did throw up. Repeatedly. The three of us stared at each other, wide-eyed. What was going on? Was I pregnant? I picked up the half-empty box of condoms from under my pillow and pondered it for a long time. Condoms, when used correctly, have a success rate of over 99%. Apparently, I was the unlucky, less than 1% failure. Actually, considering that 1% probability and the frequency of our encounters, let's just say there had been at least 300 opportunities. It was practically a statistical inevitability. I should have been a lawyer. I was clearly a mathematical genius. Rosie picked up the box of condoms and examined it. Isn't this the box we bought when we first started university? Wow, your sex life has been sparse. Sasha was aghast. It's been 10 years. No wonder you're pregnant. A hospital checkup confirmed it. 42 days, with a fetal heartbeat and yolk sac. Ethan was gone, vanished without a trace. Rosie and Sasha cursed him as a scumbag and started researching clinics that advertised painless abortions back to work the same afternoon. But the moment I heard that tiny heartbeat, a wave of maternal love washed over me. I knew I was keeping this baby. Rosie was shocked. Sasha was shocked. After confirming that their old clubbing buddy, yours truly, hadn't completely lost her mind, they asked the crucial question. How are you going to register a child born out of wedlock? We all fell silent, frantically searching on our phones. How do children without legal status attend school? Birth certificates. Birth permits. I'm going to have the baby in America, I announced, having already formulated a plan. They exchanged a skeptical look. They'd heard stories of wealthy men's mistresses fleeing to America to give birth. But while I wasn't exactly broke, I hadn't been diligently saving. Could I afford to raise a child? I had enough. I felt like I had an abundance of love to give this child. Back home, my parents were still engaged in their usual verbal sparring match about the law firm's partnership. Having grown up listening to this, I was used to it, but I still managed to pick up a few new colorful phrases. They certainly kept it fresh. When they finally tired themselves out, I told them my news. Mom, Dad, I want to get an LLM at the University of Washington. I've already applied. The University of Washington's LLM program was top tier. They were astonished that their daughter, who'd been coasting for years, relying on family, connections to secure a legal position at a company, and spending her free time partying with her friends, had suddenly become so ambitious. Was it because of that American doctor boyfriend? My father spoke first, initially berating me for my lack of ambition after graduating from university, accusing me of having achieved nothing. But then he praised me for considering furthering my education in America at the ripe old age of 28, whether it was for genuine academic pursuits or to chase after my boyfriend. He was supportive. My mother then expressed a concern and a hope. Her concern, after years of slacking off, could I even get into a prestigious university like Washington? Her hope, since we'd been together for almost a year, I should bring the young doctor home to meet them. I, of course, responded smoothly, allaying their concerns, securing a substantial sum of money, and began preparing for my upcoming, yet entirely fictitious, new semester. Kevin, ever opportune, reappeared. He said he knew everything. He was willing to marry me. I knew it. Rosie and Sasha had betrayed me. Or maybe they'd both betrayed me. They didn't approve of me becoming a single mother, and they were even more skeptical about me having a baby in America. They'd told Kevin, who was always full of ideas. Kevin was direct. Initially, when you were with the doctor, I was a little worried. After all, among everyone around us, we're the most suitable couple for marriage. It would eliminate a lot of complications. Marriage doesn't have to be about love, but it's strongly related to assets and family. You know what your parents are like, what my parents are like. You probably don't have many unrealistic fantasies about marriage. Now, I'm willing to acknowledge this child. I'll keep it a secret from both sets of parents. We'll get married. It will be beneficial for both of us. I stroked my belly, taking a long time to answer. He meant well, I understood that. If not marrying meant a death sentence, immediate execution, I'd agree without hesitation. But in this society, I'll be happier raising a child alone than trapped in a meaningless marriage. Don't argue with me. You should save marriage for someone more suitable. Kevin was playing the role of the domineering CEO, but without the lovesick heart. He was all about maximizing resources, enjoying the physicality of young women, but avoiding the responsibilities of a long-term relationship. In his eyes, I was a candidate who could be marketed as the CEO's childhood sweetheart from a family of lawyers and a top law school graduate. Someone who would enhance his perfect resume, and he was even willing to tolerate me carrying someone else's child. Kevin, I like you. You don't like me. You just like the way you look when you're with me. After I said that, I left. I had to find an apartment overseas, get a visa, and I found a job as an editor for a legal journal. The pay was low, but the hours were flexible, and I could work remotely, which meant I'd have some income when I got to America. At 30 weeks, when my sweaters could no longer conceal my growing belly, I took a tourist visa and flew straight to Washington. Lying here, at least I wouldn't have to constantly check the weather. Rosie and Sasha followed shortly after. They still felt guilty about informing Kevin, but I knew they were just worried about me. We continued our usual antics, except they drank alcohol and I drank juice. Until the other day, when we partied a little too hard, and I went into premature labor. And that's when I discovered he was working at this very hospital. Ethan helped me out of bed to walk. Without the pain pump, the pain was excruciating, and I was covered in a cold sweat. You're different from before. No kidding. Giving birth changes a person. Should I just hop out of bed and go clubbing? I just regret that I wasn't the one to be there for you, for those changes. During my week-long hospital stay, Ethan fully embodied the role of a gentle ex, and he asked about 800 times about the baby's father. Actually, Ethan could easily obtain a blood sample from the baby. If he had doubts, he could have it tested. But he insisted on hearing it from me. Based on the timing, you were with me constantly during that period. How do you know I wasn't sneaking out too, while you were working overtime? His face darkened, and he said nothing. He'd never trusted me, even breaking up with me by saying I couldn't stand being alone. So, when you left, you just came back here to continue working as a doctor at this hospital? No, it's a long story. You've changed too. You even said, it's a long story. Your Mandarin is really improving. Thank you. Too bad I wasn't the one who taught you. I looked at the beautiful doctor he'd been embracing, who was now standing at the other end of the hallway. I smiled. This is as far as you need to go. Goodbye. Rosie and Sasha loved putting bows and little dresses on the baby. I emphasized repeatedly that the baby was a boy, and boys should have a bit of masculinity. Back at the rented apartment, I found a quiet corner to video call my parents. I had to be serious and composed, with no baby items visible, since I still needed to use their supplementary credit cards. But the fact that I'd had a baby would inevitably be revealed. I was prepared. I'd find a job before my savings ran out. Becoming a mother had made me more anxious, but also more fulfilled. Rosie and Sasha had declared themselves the baby's godmothers, saying they'd help raise him. I knew they were worried about the pressure on me. They'd stayed with me for a long time, and now that the baby was born safely and the doula was settled, I told them to go back home. Ethan came twice a week, ostensibly for follow-up appointments, checking my incision and the baby's condition. After realizing Rosie and Sasha had left, he shamelessly moved in. What is this? I asked, holding up the extra toothbrush and towel. Do you think this is your home? He looked utterly innocent. I'll pay rent. Your apartment is so big. It's a waste for one person. Do you realize how shameless you are? Isn't it about looks? Ugly is shameless, handsome is domineering. Oh, so he knew about the domineering CEO trope now. He'd been learning a lot. Get out. I need to pump. Yes, ma'am. He grabbed the unwashed bottles and a bag of used diapers and walked out, gently closing the door behind him. Domineering CEO, my foot. This blissful period didn't last long. My mother called, saying a friend's child, who was studying for an LLM in Washington, said there was no Chloe Chin at the university. The day had finally arrived. My heart pounded, but I confessed boldly, yes, I took your money and came to America to eat, drink, and have fun. Chloe Chin, you've got some nerve. You get back here immediately. I hung up. 10 minutes later, I received a video call request from my father. I declined it. The only time they stood united was when they were lecturing me. I really didn't understand them. They clearly despised me, and they both had affairs. Why didn't they just remarry, have more children, start over, and avoid the mistakes I'd made? Ethan, as if he had superhuman hearing, ran over from the other side of the apartment. That's unfortunate. Your parents aren't going to support you anymore, and I've lost my job. Speaking of which, I hadn't seen Ethan going to work for a while now. He thought the dualist childcare methods were too old-fashioned, so he'd unilaterally dismissed her and taken over her role. I couldn't do anything about it. I had to support a child on a single income, so every penny saved was crucial. Really? You lost your job? So you can't pay rent? Wait, why did you lose your job? Ethan shrugged, about to explain, when the baby started crying. He turned and rushed to the baby's room without a word. 5 minutes later, the crying stopped. That's how Ethan and I ended up living together, in this haphazard, undefined way. I still didn't have the courage to ask him about the reason for our breakup. I was afraid I'd get emotional, and breastfeeding mothers with unstable emotions are prone to losing their milk supply, and I couldn't afford formula right now. Occasionally, I'd try to talk to him, but just as I got to the crucial point, the baby's cries would interrupt us. Looking back now, I realized that without Ethan during that time, facing that high-needs baby alone, I might have become severely depressed. My parents arrived a week later, earlier than I'd expected. The baby was a little over 2 months old and could smile. The moment they walked in, their expressions shifted from anger to shock, and then gradually softened, in their demeanor, their tone, and their movements. Ethan and I stood side by side like two kids caught skipping school to play video games, awaiting the headmaster's verdict. When they turned to look at us, holding the baby, their eyes were sparkling. Were those tears of joy reflecting the light? Dad? Mom? Look at him. He's the spitting image of Chloe when she was a baby. At that moment, I saw something I'd never seen in my father or mother before, a maternal glow. After their initial astonishment and exclamations, my baby fell asleep. They tiptoed out of the room and told Ethan and me to sit down. You have a little one, and you didn't tell us? Yes, if we hadn't found out. How long were you planning to keep it a secret? Did you get married in America? Are you going to have a wedding back home? Where are you planning to live in the future? Ethan scratched his head and looked at me. I took a deep breath and declared, I'm not getting married. I have an income, I can raise the child myself, and when I earn a little more, I'll pay you back the money I tricked you out of. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for a scolding. My parents wanted to explode, but they held back because the baby was sleeping. They hissed, "This is outrageous. How can you have a baby and not get married?" Ethan, what do you say? What do you think? Ethan, who had seemed detached from the situation, responded promptly, Mom, Dad, I want to get married right away, have a wedding back home. Settle down back home, and little one is a fine name for the baby. Chloe always calls him the baby, and I'm getting a little tired of it. I rolled my eyes. All the kids in my hometown are called little one. Good, good. Ethan is so reliable. My father smiled broadly. Look at him. My mother also nodded approvingly. My parents went back home first. I had to return to China before my tourist visa expired. I'd originally planned to defy my parents, tear up my passport, and stay here illegally. But after traveling all the way to America and running into Ethan again, it seemed like going back was the better option. Ethan helped me pack a lot of suitcases. He seemed very happy. Did you steal a sample of my son's blood and do a DNA test? I asked coldly, holding the baby, hoping he'd change his mind and stay in America. After all, he didn't have a job, and if he went to China and got dumped, he might not have enough money to buy a plane ticket and might have to ask me for money. He was stunned, then his eyes lit up. No, I didn't have the courage to do that. I just know that I want to be with you, to raise him together. It doesn't matter if he's not mine. But I want to be a single mother. This isn't a fad. Raising a child is expensive. You can consider me. I'm a pretty good guy. Huh. Marrying a scumbag would be even more costly. Just seeing him embracing someone else had felt like a lightning strike. But I liked him, and subconsciously, I wanted to forgive him. We're all human. Who doesn't like a handsome guy, especially one with 8-pack abs who does housework, takes care of the baby, and has no bad habits? I was madly in love with him. If he changed his mind again in the future, repeatedly, over and over, it would be devastating for me. It would be better to cut ties now, before it got any worse. Since the possibility of the child not being his biologically didn't deter him, I decided to try another tactic. I don't even like you. How can you not like me? You just have some psychological issues. Oh, defeated. I deflated, my emotions suddenly spiraling out of control. I cried, yelling, yes, I have issues. Before you left, I came to see you, and I saw you hugging another girl, whispering. Don't tell me I saw it wrong, or that you'll change. I'm not blind. And I'm not stupid. I can make my own judgments. But I have issues. I still like you. I'm afraid I'll fall deeper, loving you and hating you at the same time, unable to leave, unable to escape, constantly fighting. My whole life would be ruined. The baby, sensing my negative energy, erupted in a deafening cry. Ethan was at a loss, holding the baby and trying to comfort me, who was on the verge of a breakdown. Baby, mommy is just being emotional because of the postpartum hormones. Don't be scared. Mommy, Chloe, I didn't know you were coming to see me. That was my sister, my biological sister. Who would believe that? But I was sobbing so hard I could barely breathe, so I just punched him. The apartment door was unlocked, and at some point, it had been pushed open. The beautiful female doctor was standing in the doorway. Oh, God. What kind of drama was this? The mistress had come to confront me. I pointed at the door, still crying, desperate, utterly desperate. My taste in men was truly appalling. Ethan, didn't you say your flight was at 3 p.m. today? I've been waiting for you downstairs for ages. What's with all the crying? Ethan? I'm sorry, Mia. Can you help me take these 2 suitcases downstairs? I'll wait for Chloe to calm down. Mia? That Mia gave me a look of pity. My sister-in-law's postpartum depression is pretty severe, huh? Was that appropriate? Was it appropriate to say that in front of a postpartum woman? Sister-in-law? Mia, what's your last name? I managed to ask, my voice choked with sobs. My last name is Hayes. She was a little aloof, with the kind of calm detachment you see in medical professionals who've dealt with countless serious cases when faced with a minor scratch. Suddenly, I kind of liked her. I'm fine now, I said, wiping away my tears and snot. I smiled. Hey, it's not a big deal. Even if they weren't related by blood, what's a hug? We modern women are very open-minded. Mia, thank you for driving us. I took her hand affectionately. She looked at me as if I were a ghost, grabbed the suitcases, and fled. Ethan, that's terrifying. I'm definitely not having children. The mood swings are too much. I haven't had an easy time lately, and I won't be able to take care of you in the coming days. You take care of yourself. After saying that, Ethan signaled us to be quiet. He wanted to use the half-hour drive to calm the baby down and hopefully get him to sleep on the plane. Mia drove very smoothly. In the rearview mirror, she and Ethan looked exactly alike. How had I not noticed that before? But Mia kept looking at me as if I were seriously ill. Ethan was taking care of the baby in the VIP lounge, and Mia and I were chatting outside. Actually, it was mostly me repeatedly asking, "Are you really siblings?" and Mia repeatedly saying, "We're fraternal twins, as close as siblings can be." Ethan and Mia were born in America, but when they were 4 years old, their parents separated. Mia went to China with their mother, and Ethan stayed in America with their father. Their parents were both doctors without borders, very famous ones, but they had terrible personalities. Neither of them would give in to the other. They needed to go to different places, rarely saw each other, and when they did, they'd start arguing within 3 sentences. After the divorce, Ethan and Mia would spend their vacations together, either in China or in America. Over a year ago, Ethan's mother was diagnosed with brain cancer. At that time, Ethan had just passed the USMLE. When he heard the news, he immediately returned to China. After undergoing treatment. For a while, Ethan's mother realized her time was limited. She gave up treatment and went with Ethan's father to the place where they'd first met to spend their remaining days together. Ethan was devastated. He didn't agree with his mother's decision to give up treatment, and he couldn't understand why his father, who always opposed his mother, had agreed to her request so readily. He felt abandoned by his parents, and he drowned his sorrows in alcohol at the bar. That's when I picked him up. The day I went to see him with the spring-loaded boxing glove, it was just after the 2 siblings had received news of their mother's death. But Ethan had come to terms with it. He was hugging his sister, Mia, saying their parents had shared a beautiful memory in the end, without arguments, only love. He said they should live in the present, not disappoint those who loved them, and not miss out on those they loved. Ethan had wanted to come find me, but then he learned that his father had contracted malaria in Africa. The local medical conditions were poor, and he and Mia had to go there immediately to take care of their father and bring him back to America. His father was old and in low spirits, and they weren't able to save him. A doctor who'd spent years treating aid workers for infectious diseases had died of malaria while traveling. Later, he'd tried to contact me, but he discovered I'd blocked him. He'd thought about finding me, but he worried I'd moved on. He'd wasted time hesitating. I suddenly felt terrible. He'd gone through all of this and I had no idea. I just assumed he was busy, that he was unhappy at work. I hadn't even cared about him. I'd never known how to care for others. I just selfishly guarded my own heart, protecting myself from getting hurt. Sister-in-law, don't look at me with that pitying expression. My parents were in love, and they reconciled at the end of their lives. I think they were happy. I was surprised. Sister-in-law, you and Ethan are very much in love too. I can see that. But being in love doesn't necessarily mean you'll stay together, because love and life are two different things. It's easy to fall in love, but to stay together, you have to be tolerant of each other and know how to compromise. I didn't expect Mia to have such insights. Mia said it was a lesson her brother had learned. A lesson he learned from you. Ethan said he met a girl he liked, but she had a peculiar personality. She wanted to love, but she was afraid of getting hurt. She imagined obstacles that didn't exist, tormenting herself. That sounded a bit like me. Actually, a person's family background has a huge impact on them. Parents with a failed marriage can make their children lose trust in their partners. You have to give her enough security, be constantly tolerant of her. Eventually, you'll be able to smooth out her rough edges. I'd never told Ethan about my family, and Ethan had never told me about his. I didn't expect him to have seen the shadow of my parents in me. Ethan is a pretty good guy. At least he knows that no matter how angry you are during an argument, you shouldn't add fuel to the fire when a woman is having a breakdown, especially since our father was always setting a bad example. After Mia said that, it was time to board the plane. I was truly grateful to her. My postpartum depression had significantly improved. Ethan isn't an obstetrician. He was banned from practicing for a year for performing an unauthorized C-section on you. He didn't dispute it with the hospital or appeal to the association. He said he'd use this year to be a full-time dad. I was shocked and a little pained, looking back at Ethan in the lounge, his eyes dark with exhaustion from staying up for so long. He'd sacrificed so much for me, in ways I hadn't even known, and he'd endured my tempestuous moods. I secretly made a resolution. Love, life, the child. I wouldn't let Ethan shoulder it all alone anymore. Mia thought I was worried about something else. She quickly added, "Sister-in-law, you don't need to worry about finances. Our parents didn't leave a huge fortune, but it's more than enough to support your little family." I turned back to her, my eyes welling up with tears, and said emotionally, I know. Ethan is a good husband, Mia is a good girl, and we'll all be happy." Mia, perhaps overwhelmed by my emotional display, subtly withdrew her hands. Sister-in-law, postpartum hormone levels can fluctuate wildly. You should still see a proper obstetrician regularly, okay? Ethan and I returned to China. Mia stayed in America to sort through their father's documents and books, and to await the invitation to our wedding. Ethan, do you know what marriage represents? Ethan thought I was about to say something ridiculous to annoy him. He said casually, "It means you can only sleep with me from now on. It also means you have to share your joys and sorrows with me from now on. I heard about your parents and about you performing the unauthorized C-section on me. I want to get to know you. Will you tell me more?" Ethan looked up, astonished. "Chloe, are you really willing to marry me?" I nodded. "Are you really willing to marry me?" Ethan hugged me tightly. "Of course I am." I whispered in his ear, "The baby is yours. From the first day I met you, I haven't slept with anyone else. Because you were the only one in my heart, my body couldn't accept anyone else." Ethan looked stunned, but he suppressed his joy and excitement, trying to appear nonchalant. He rushed into the nursery, his hands trembling slightly. He looked at the sleeping child and murmured, "I get it. I'm amazing. I'm a sharpshooter."